Welcome. Thank you all for joining. I'm Loxton at the moment. We've got people all over the place. So, as you know, we have deferred this item joining us. Andy and I are going to give an overview and a presentation on the sustainability review for tourism, maritime, and heritage operations, which we've been working on for a while now. Please bear with me because I've got slide deck next to me, and I'll be sharing my screen shortly. So if you do have a question or want to yell out, then I might not be able to see you. So just jump in and yeah, yell out where you can. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Does everyone see that? Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So, Andy, jump in whenever you want. So, as I mentioned, today's presentation is on the Sustainability Review for Tourism, Maritime and Heritage Operations. And Andy and I will share the presentation as we go through. So, the purpose of the presentation, or the review, is to review Council's tourism, heritage and maritime operations and assets with the objective of delivering Council's strategic objectives and driving financial and operational sustainability. So this has been the key across all of our sustainability reviews, but obviously the focus of this has been on our tourism, heritage and maritime operations, which is a significant part of our business and a really, really important one as well. So Andy's going to give an overview of the broad breadth of the tourism, maritime and heritage operations, which is demonstrated by this wagon wheel.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ben. I'm sure most elected members are already aware of the breadth of the tourism function, but the next few slides just outline that for this presentation. Clearly, three major elements of work are associated with our maritime assets, heritage assets, and our visitor servicing. The other functions that we perform, of course, as a Man of Markets event, marketing for the tourism product and the region, volunteer management, industry engagement, compliance not only for council but also AMSA and SafeWork in relation to the business, and of course our three committees that we deal with in the tourism space. So the first element of that, the maritime assets with our three vessels, two operational and one almost operational, and those are all at various stages in their operations. The Mayflower is very consistent, goes out 4 days a week and is our major money earner, but is also a heritage vessel and subject to breakdown and need for attention from our wonderful volunteers. The Marion is in a transition stage where we're looking at the target markets for that vessel, trying to obviously get the boat filled as more often than what we've been able to the last couple of years. I think there's been some change from the time COVID hit through the floods, and now we're trying to find our feet again with Marion, although she has had a good year. And Canali has come a long way since the floods. The restoration project almost completed. We are working through the final maintenance work that has to be done and jobs that have to be done in Canali to get Ben to sign off on continuing with the allocation of budget and things like that. So that's a brief snapshot of the vessels. Move on to heritage assets. Principal areas are the Mannum Dock Discovery Centre and everything associated with here. not only obviously the inside, but the outside exhibits and the wharves. The Landseer Museum, which is a standalone museum in Morgan, lovely building, fantastic collection, needs some TLC and some work to get that in order, but doing okay. And of course, the Port of Morgan precinct, which is essentially the old station master's house, Pendle's craft shop, the railway platforms and associated buildings through to the old wharf area. Quite a significant part of Morgan's history, and there is obviously that level of disconnect there in Morgan between the precinct, the Landseer Museum, and the centre of town, which we do need to have a good look at if we're to be sustainable. We'll move on to visitor servicing, something we do in both areas. The Visitor Information Centre in Mannum is accredited, meets the standards for a nationally accredited visitor information centre, and therefore carries the trademarked logo. The Morgan is a visitor information office or visitor information outlet, also operates from approximately the same site, the craft shop over there. Both of those information provisions or visitor servicing provisions are essential for visitors to get local information and referrals, and there's certainly definite evidence in that space that they're doing well. Mannum VIC also includes the Arnold Gallery, which we're putting under the visitor servicing element as far as this review is concerned.
Thank you, Andy. So we'll pause there to see if there's any questions on any of those functional areas. We'll go into a bit more detail further on, but just wanted to make sure that, especially some of our newer elected members, if there's any questions that you might not be across some of that detail. No? Can you still hear me, Andy?
Yes, I can, Ben.
Yep. Okay. No, I've just lost the screen completely, so I'll just keep talking. So please yell out. So what Andy and I've done, as you can see from this slide, there's a lot of different functions. So we've split it into the three most significant, and we've set it up into tranches so we can deal with it rather than it, to be honest, got too big a scope if we were looking at the all of the tranches in one. So we've broken it up into tranche one, which is the maritime assets being the Mayflower, the Marion, the Canally, and the volunteer workforce that's associated with the maritime assets. We still have volunteers that help out in the other areas. Do you want to give a quick overview, Andy, of the volunteer workforce and how that looks?
Yeah, so I think there's a slide on volunteers coming up, but the volunteer workforce for the vessels, of all of our volunteer hours and probably 140 volunteers in total. I've got to get that number correct in my head one day, or accurate. They put in a significant amount of hours, and around about 72% of all volunteer hours are vessel or maritime related. So it's a very big part of what we do and what my staff look after. It's volunteer workforce is never an easy task, particularly when you've got so many people. But they all come together for a common cause. They're all keen as mustard to help with the vessels, and we certainly couldn't run 2 or even 3 of these boats when the Canally does come online without them.
Thank you, Andy. So as I said, tranche one is the maritime assets, which is the most, probably fair to say, Andy, most significant percentage of your time and the staff's time and budget associated with that.
Yeah, that's correct, Ben. Does take a lot of time, particularly when we're talking about volunteer management as well as boat operation.
So tranche two will involve heritage assets, so the museums and other assets we spoke about previously, visitor servicing, the Manor Markets, tourism marketing, and the volunteers non-maritime. So as we've worked through this, we've had a number of considerations come up that council will need to consider and will form part of the report that we'll provide at the next council meeting. So historic investment. So council has invested significantly in these assets. When I talk about the maritime assets over many, many years, both in finances and human resources and the volunteer investment that Andy's touched on, and we've got a slide on that as well. Public perception. Obviously, Mannum was the birthplace and significant river history up and down the river across all of our towns, from Cadell, Morgan, and down to Mannum. The perception of council is responsible for boats and should be maintaining and supporting that history and investing in that for posterity. Sorry. The history of the town and the region, which I've sort of just touched on as well. You would appreciate, you'll volunteer in different capacities, the benefits for the community for volunteering. And Andy mentioned that we have 140 odd volunteers in the tourism function. So there's a significant benefit for the community for those people that are volunteering throughout the tourism space. Competitive neutrality. So what this is local government isn't able to run commercial enterprises in competition with others if there's a benefit because we're a local government. So we need to be very, very careful that we're not competing. For example, Dave wouldn't be able to run a infrastructure business in competition if the other businesses within the region, because that's illegal. So we need to be making sure that the services we are offering aren't in direct competition as such, or are complementary, or we don't have a benefit for it because we are able to use volunteer labour. So it's something that we do need to be mindful of. Clearly, finance and sustainability is a significant consideration, given this is what this review is all about. And we've focused on that as we've worked through the different elements of the tourism function. And the other consideration that we've identified is the tourism economy. The reason why council currently operates boats and museums, as well as supporting the history of the town and the region, but is also to drive economic development through the tourism and visitors coming to the region. And Andy's got some data on that, because people come up to go on the Mayflower or the Marion, or hopefully the Canally, not too far away in Morgan, and they'll visit the town, they'll spend some money in the pubs, but they also go out to the other regions or other towns within the region as well. Are there any, again, I can't see you, but are there any questions on any of the considerations? Or Andy, do you want to add anything to what I've just said?
For me, I think you've covered it fairly well. I guess just flicking back to public perception, when I came along, there was a lot of people telling me how, council have been involved in boats for 30 years since the Marion was restored and put back on the river, and then the Canally was purchased 15 years ago, and we've got all the volunteers that work on our vessels and all that sort of stuff. And it was made very clear to me that, whilst there's an element of ratepayers within the area that may not like us spending money on boats, and that's fair enough, the vast majority of people that knew what our tourism assets were and what our council was involved with was the running of boats. So it was part and parcel of my consideration, looking at culture and how those boats have operated. And it will be part, I guess, consideration for the sustainability report. Of course, volunteer benefits go two ways: benefits for council and benefits against council. And the point of competitive neutrality, I think we're okay at the moment, but it is a risk to future operations if a charter operator happened to want to run a maritime business out of Mannum or Morgan.
Thank you. And the other significant consideration is council's core functions and what we're here to deliver for the community. So I'll move on to some financial analysis. but I want to come back to considerations because part of members on considerations that you want to us to consider as part of the report that will be tabled for you. So we don't want to miss anything that we may not have included. So please, if there's other things that you feel should be considered or should inform the report, then please let us know as part of this presentation. So I'll go on
Ben,
to
just a comment, Ben, just on the historic investment. Just particularly, Mannum is known as the birthplace of the paddle steamer, so that's like a huge thing as well. That's sort of part of its identity.
Thank you, Jen.
To comment.
Any other comments? No. So the next few slides are a very high level financial overview, and there'll be further detail in the report, but I'll just go through each of the boats and Andy and I can talk to this. So the PW Mayflower, we've focused and we haven't given historical data because of COVID and the floods. So we've focused on the last financial year, which was, Andy, it's fair to say that was back to normal operations as much as we could, given those two events. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably our first full year of normal operations, and just need to quantify or qualify these next three slides. The data that I had was 11 out of 12 months of the year. So the last month for these slides had to be estimated. They will be updated for the report to council in August.
Thank you, Andy. So from an operating result, the Mayflower produced us, or currently $64,000 surplus with the allocation of wages. And again, Andy, this is done with some assumptions. So he's looked at each of the staff in his area and allocated a percentage cost attribution to operating of that boat. And is estimated $31,000. So the net operating result for the Mayflower in the last financial year, as with Andy saying, the last month was being estimated, was around $33,000. So the capital renewal costs for the Mayflower in the last 12 months was
Sounds not great, Ben. Sorry to interrupt. Sounds playing up a little bit.
So
with
no
you.
money from a capital perspective on renewal. Oh, okay. How's that? Can you hear me?
That's better, Ben.
What did you miss? What did they miss, Andy?
They basically missed everything you were talking about that slide, except for they got
Okay.
they got the $33,000.
Shall I start again then?
Maybe just talk about capital renewal costs.
Okay. Yeah, apologies. I can't see you because I'm sharing my slide deck. So capital renewal, we didn't spend any money in the last financial year on capital investment. But as you're aware, we've just finished an asset management plan for our maritime assets or river assets. And so the figure at the last point there, the $14,000, that is what is required according to that plan annually over the next 10 years. So $14,000 per year over that 10-year period. So Andy, do you want to talk to that slide any more than you didn't hear me, or anything else to add?
No, I think that's pretty good. That 10-year spend, of course, won't be $14,000 every year. It'll be every second or third year when we're slipping that the multiples of the 14 will come into play.
So onto the PS Marion. So the operating result for last year, or this year, last financial year, was a $32,000 surplus, and Andy can talk to that. As hopefully you picked up, the estimated wage allocation to that from Andy and his staff was around $77,000. So a net operating result was a loss of $45,000 circa. from an operating perspective. Andy, do you want to talk to how the boat performed last year from an operating perspective?
Sure. Marion got off to a great start last financial year and put quite a bit of money in the bank before she went down to Galway for slipping. Of course, then we had a hiatus for nearly 3 months while we fixed steam pipes and other things. She came back, have a bit of a bang. We've been trying a few different things for different type of cruises with the Marion over the last 6 months. Some of those are turning out to be quite successful. And as I said earlier, we're looking at trying to attract a new target demographic to build up the operating result for PS Marion. Clearly, the PS Marion has the largest amount of staff allocation to it, a very difficult vessel to coordinate the operation of. Large crew, a lot of volunteers, a lot of volunteer hours, and takes a fair amount of effort. Finding systems and processes need to be looked at from our end to try and find some time savings for my staff, and we've been certainly looking at that over the 12 months as well. So sustainable in operation, but not if or when we add the support time to the vessel.
Thank you. So we'll move on to capital renewal costs. Last year was a significant year. Andy, I think it gets slipped every 3 to 5 years. So there was some significant investment required in the last financial year of around $178,000. There's a note there that through the generous support of Rockford's and the sponsorship fund, $47,000 of that 178 was covered by Rockford, which so that net is 131 from that. The 10-year annual capital investment per annum is estimated to be around $38,000. And as Andy pointed out, that won't be every year. But for example, if in 3 years' time there might be a requirement for $120,000 to be invested. Andy, do you want to talk to that?
No, that's exactly right. Exactly right there, Ben. There might be a little bit of an extra contribution from Rockford there once we finalise the agreement with them. There is discussion of including some of the slipping costs from the sponsorship fund as well. So that 47 was the amount that they covered for steam pipe replacement and repairs.
Thank you.
Can
Ben,
I
is that-
can I ask a complete boat ignorant question? Can you just clarify for me exactly what the slipping process is?
Slipping process, Mandy?
Yes, what it entails.
Yeah, so it's when we have to bring the vessel out of the water to inspect the hull. It's very important for our insurers. They ask for reports on hull integrity, and they like us to, we're required by AMSA to pull it out twice in a 5-year cycle. So whilst we've worked on twice in 5 years, technically we can, if the boats are in good repair, push one out a little bit as long as we've done it twice in 5 years. So we did Marion, say, in November 24. We could potentially go out to 28 before we pull it out of the water again. It will still be twice in 5 years, but we've scheduled Marion, I think, in probably 3 years or in a couple of years' time.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Is that all the boats that need to be slipped?
Every single one of them, unfortunately, Councillor.
Thank you.
And I've just got a comment question. I believe that the slips that will accommodate boat the size of the Marion are becoming much more rare. There's only, I believe, I've heard there's only 2 slips now big enough to take the larger boats. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The Berry Slipway and the Galway Slipway, Hindmarsh Island Slipway.
And Andy, it's a logistical nightmare for you and the volunteers, isn't it? Involved in the slipping process, whether that's at Berry or the Marion went down to Galway this time.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've had Mayflower across the river at Reschke's. We've had the Marion down at Hindmarsh Island and the Canally in Berry, all in the last few years. It is logistically difficult.
Thank you. Any other questions on the Marion while we've got that slide up? Are you there?
I think everybody's nice and quiet, Ben, but I can hear you. So
Okay. For some reason, my slide deck is not working and I can't go down to the next one. Hang on. I'll just have to stop sharing for a second and reshare. Is that back up?
yes, it is.
For some reason, it's not going through. Hang on. Might have to call on IT support, Darren. Just give me one more shot.
Just try your spacebar, Ben. That might work. It's either the down arrow or spacebar, or your mouse click might move the slide on.
Oh, there we go. We're back on. Thank you. So, Marion, we're off to the Canally. Is that a full screen? Is that okay, Clive? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good, Ben.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for the IT. Clearly, the internet doesn't work in Loxton. So, operating result for the Canally, and just the little asterisk there is clearly the vessel's not operating yet, so no income as of yet. So the operating result was a $40,000 loss for the year, with the staff allocation of approximately $37,000. So net operating result is a negative 77, but noting that there was no income. So capital renewal for the boat over the last 12 months was $22,000, and that involved the slipping for the survey, Andy, up in Berry. And as per the asset management plan, a required contribution every year for 10 years is $12,000, noting that that may not happen every year, and it may be $50,000, every second year. Andy, do you want to talk to that slide?
Yeah, that's right, Ben. So the annual investment going forward, which is essentially going to be a brand new boat, is lower than the other two vessels that we own. That sort of makes sense. The capital investment was the Berry costs, and you'll notice staff wage allocation quite large in comparison to that. That is wages that have been attracted all throughout the restoration project, the support of the committees and the volunteers and everything else that we do for the Canally. I'd imagine that the wage allocation will increase when operations happen, but obviously the operating result will be a better position than what's portrayed on screen right now.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions on the broad financial analysis? No, if not, we'll go down to passenger numbers. So, Andy, do you want to talk to this slide?
Yeah, I can talk to these next few slides, Ben. Passenger numbers. The clarification around this is that when I prepared the information for Ben's slide a few weeks back, were based on 3/4 of the year. We have over the last week finalised data, and that will be represented in the report. So at that time, I estimated numbers for the final quarter. And that's what you're seeing there: 4,664 for Mayflower and 1,400 for Marion. Just for your information, the numbers actually turned out to be 200 less for the Mayflower and 350 more for the Marion. So the Marion had a very good end to the year.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions on passenger numbers? If not, so the next slide talks about the regional tourism economy. So Andy will talk to this.
So we've taken data from Regional Development Australia, Murraylands and Riverland, and this data is specifically for the value of tourism for the Mid-Murray Council region. So a total of $109 million and 269 jobs, or full-time jobs, I would imagine. So that's made up of direct spending, referral, business referral spending as well. So quite in-depth information that Regional Development Australia undertake. And it's very good to have some data like that for our council area. The boats, the value of our boats to tourism has been calculated by using the Tourism SA metrics for day spend and for overnight spending. There is an assumption that it's about 50-50, and this is information I've got from my staff. About 50% of people that are coming to our boats are coming specifically because of the boats, and the other 50% are converted from us having boats available for them to go on the day, or to stay another night and go on.
So Andy, just to clarify that, just so you're saying 50% of the tourism that are coming specifically to attend and go on a boat, and then the other 50% of people are in the region, and then they know that, well, the Mayflower is being offered, and so they're going for a cruise on the Mayflower.
That's correct. Or the visitor centre is talking them into it, or telling them that's one of the things that they have to do. Often that'll mean that the grey nomads will stay another night or two just to be able to go out on the boats, particularly if we're around when Marion is cruising. So they are a really big draw card. So using the Tourism SA metric, that actually comes out to something like $886,000, but the 50% is on the basis that they're the people who've come specifically for a cruise on our vessels, and we've used the Tourism SA metric to work out the 443,000. Interestingly, the final result of that is around about $475,000. And from our perspective, because people are spending that money, that also includes the money they're spending on our boats and in our product that we're running as a council. So it's a fairly substantial number, and it's a good result for the business that we're running.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions on that slide?
Yeah, can I just look back at the numbers, the capacity and forward business plan for the Canali? Do we have that already, or are we working on a predicted return from the Canali?
That is being considered, has been considered for some time. There is a proposed cruise schedule which I will use to forecast income. The cruise schedule, I think, is a little ambitious, so we'll look to scale that back a bit. And I think that is a general agreement between the operational committees that we need to do that. Focus more on getting more people on the days we are cruising than trying to run twice as many cruises and find that we're not getting any more money or being sustainable for our volunteers' health and well-being that way. So
will that report form part of the report in August to council?
Yes. Yeah, there'll be a forward financial projection.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Of
Can't hear you,
income.
Ben.
Sounds
for
terrible
the
again, Ben.
county as part of the
Ben, you're
report.
breaking up.
Didn't get any of it.
Ben,
Sorry.
okay, Ben,
How's,
you broke up pretty badly then.
can you hear me now, Andy?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I just asked if there's any other questions. Mandy, did you hear that there would be a financial projection as part of the report?
Good, thanks.
Thank you. All right, Andy, you want to talk to this slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So volunteer contributions, $669,000 worth of volunteer time. There's that was based on 14,000 estimated hours. The actual number is just above 15,000 and $708,000 worth. Now that is using the volunteer SA and NT metric to value volunteer hours. And 72 to 73% of all of our volunteer hours are maritime related here. It's the measure is a two-way street. It's a benefit to council, and it's also a social benefit to our community and the volunteers themselves, giving a substantial and significant project for our volunteers to get involved with, the social aspects of it, the mental health aspects of getting out of the house. All of those things come into that SANT value that they put onto volunteers.
Questions?
Yep, one more on that point. I know it's been tricky, and it will, I presume, be a constant issue getting the skill mix you need, Andy, for votes. Do you have any comments on how that's going to work with the Canali? Whether what sort of, I'm interested in what the scale is of the likelihood we're going to get the skill mix that we need for all three boats.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mandy, and we have been talking about that. It formed part of the consultation with the Heritage Maritime Committee. We do feel that having three boats may have an impact on our volunteer skill set, given that our volunteers in Manham will also want to be involved with the Canali. So we will have to seriously look at the schedule for the Canali and also make sure that that schedule doesn't impede the schedule of the Marion particularly. It is a very valid point. We have taken on 5 trainee engineers. We have a number of captains in our system, and we have done a lot of training in Morgan for crew members for shipboard safety, first aid, and other things already in preparation for Canali to come on board. We've also run some training cruises out of Morgan while we had a permit from AMSA to operate without passengers. So there's a lot of that has already happened in the background, but there still needs to be consideration as to whether or not there is a severe impact going to be caused to the other 2 boats because Canali operations. I think we can minimise it. I think there are a significant amount of people in and around the Morgan area that are committed to this project, and we'll make sure that we can be, give it the best shot possible to give Canali the best chance to succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. I'll move on. So the next slide talks about options. So this is what Andy and I, and consultation with the committee, have identified as potential options for council to consider. So option 1 is the status quo, where we own and operate the boats. As we do cruising across all 3 once the Canali is on board, and we continue to operate with refinement, Andy, and improvements, but pretty much as it is. The other alternative of the status quo is a static display, where potentially the Marion becomes, it doesn't operate as such, But in consideration of that, and Andy will talk to this, there may not be much saving in that because you still have to insure it. You still have to have, if it's on water, you still have to have a survey. So Andy, do you want to talk about option one?
Yeah, so option one is there because that's essentially saying there's no change. But owning and operating 3 boats, we can look at the boats individually or collectively. As Ben said, if there were a serious mechanical issue, say with Marion, I think everyone understands that council won't have the money to spend 250 to $1 million to fix it up. So, it could be a decision that is made now or in the future. We certainly understand if our vessels find the bottom of the river that we're probably not going to be able to put them back into service. There's a lot of things that go into that status quo and static display thing. It's different than having a boat floating to operating. However, you do have all of your costs, your maintenance, your AMSA requirements and things like that. If we take it out of survey, we may be able to stay on the river, but it certainly can't move. Might minimise some of that slipping cost. But they're old boats, no matter whether they're in the water or operating or not, they will deteriorate and have to have money spent on them.
And Andy, refinement of the operations, if this was the option that council decided, we'd also be looking at maximising revenue, reducing costs, and looking how we could make them more sustainable or efficient.
Absolutely. If the status quo option is the option that council prefer, there has to be a lot of effort put into that sustainability, making sure that the vessels are well managed, the marketing is done more effectively, the volunteers are looked after, the requirements, the legislation from AMSA and Safe Work are absolutely achieved. So, we would have to refine the product, refine the operation, no doubt, because I don't think right at the moment we're quite there yet. It's come a long way the last few years, but we're not quite there yet. And there is that changing market segment to deal with for Marion particularly.
Thanks, Andy. Option 2 is we own, we maintain the ownership of the 3 boats, but we look to lease and divest operations. So, Andy, do you want to talk to that as an option?
Yeah, so this is just simply where council enter an agreement with a third party or third parties to look after one or all of our vessels. It's unlikely for me that one party would want to take all 3 vessels and as part of a fleet. However, that's an option. There is some common ground that has been come up through consultation in and around this area. Mainly because of things like competitive neutrality. Our operation would probably have to cease if another operator came in and sued or took legal action against council under competitive neutrality. So that is a high risk in that area. If it was a not-for-profit doing it, there wouldn't be the same level of expectation. Also, obviously, council systems and processes that we have excellent for local government, not quite as excellent for commercial operations, as anyone involved in those might understand. But, that's the world in which we live, and that's the world we have to operate our boats in. But it is a bit restrictive.
And Andy, can you give us an example of potentially a model where this is in place with a heritage asset?
Sure. PS Oscar W down at Galway is owned by Alexandrina Council and operated by the Friends of PS Oscar W. I believe there's a similar arrangement up in Renmark with the PS Industry as well, with Renmark Fringa Council owning the vessel.
Thank you, Andy. And the last option before I open up to questions is to divest. which would to be to sell or give the boats, all three or one of or two of or some mix to another entity or party, whether that's a not-for-profit or a commercial operator or something in between. Andy, do you want to talk to that, or is that pretty self-explanatory?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory with probably a couple of notes. Robert O'Callaghan from Rockford, Australia, when he gifted us a Mayflower, I believe he stated, or it was part of the terms, that if we ever divested the Mayflower, he had first option to get his hands back on it. So, you know, divesting, you know, it's an option, but it also brings about it will bring about a lot of I guess negativity because of the public perception that this council operates vessels. You know, if we walk away altogether, and it has been done upriver, there was a lot of negativity and bad press up there. And you know, we obviously don't want to see that down here either. But I think you know, in fairness for the sustainability report, all options have got to be put and considered.
So, and was that bad press because the boats actually were removed from operation so that people in the community could not use them, or was it just that it was a different operator to council that was the problem?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that, Mandy.
Yes, right. If you said there was, and I understand that, some bad press and concern by the community when boat services were divested by another council, in that situation, did the boats actually stop operating, or were they still operating under another auspice?
Sure. The vessel, Kevin might be able to come up with a name. I've forgotten. It's a sister ship to the Marion, so it's exactly the same boat. Had some issues with operations and volunteer, so the council pulled it out of the water and put it behind lock gates.
Oh, that's a complete switch.
It was a different position. However, you know, there, in all honesty, there are issues that we have with operations and volunteers, and you know, we don't want to go down that line while we're still operating them, and hence, you know, if we're going to operate, we have to throw everything behind them and make them as successful as we can.
Sure, I was meaning that leasing, that option is not the one that will necessarily be bad press if the boats are still available to the public. That's all I meant, really.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right. There is a massive fraternity for heritage riverboats, and there is a huge amount of social media every time one of them tootles up and down the river.
Thank you, Mandy. Any questions on the options slide?
Just in the report, Ben, Andy mentioned the boat at Renmark and the one in Alexandrina that might be leased out. Can we have some detail in the report on that and how that's working for the councils to see if that is a good option since they've already tested it?
I have tried to get some information from Alexandrina Council, but they're fairly tight-lipped on their agreement. From a council perspective, it's working quite well.
We'll do what we can, Simone. We'll get some information.
And also how long that's been going on for. Like, is it only a matter of a couple of years or longer than that? So the length of time that it's been under it's been divested from the council for those boats as well would be good.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so last slide before general discussion. Next steps. So obviously this slide deck was prepared to go 3 weeks ago. So the engagement with the committee has happened. So Andy, do you want to just give an overview of that workshop?
Sure. The workshop was attended by all but two members. Sorry, one elected member and one community member. It was a very open, honest and frank discussion about all elements of the maritime operation. From council process, volunteering, marketing, boat management, decision making, timeliness, and everything else. It was frank and honest, and you know, quite. It was a lengthy but enjoyable, necessary conversation. I'm sure the elected members online today who were there can support that as well. So I ran the committee through the various areas that we'll be looking at in a review report. I got some of their feedback, some sustainability issues, both high level and low level for operating of boats. Their views, the important high level ones, will definitely be highlighted within the report. And then if the council elect option 1, which is to continue to own and operate those boats, a number of the low level sustainability options will have to be considered as well. So the importance for the committee is that the boats continue to operate. They feel that there is neutral ground for council to own and independent not-for-profits to operate. What that looks like, we're not sure, but certainly it was an honest, rational discussion that provided common ground, I guess, to each of the options that will be decided by council ultimately.
Andy, is it fair to say, and those elected members that were there can provide some commentary, is that the preferred option would be potentially the owning but operating by a third party?
That was the overwhelming feel for the committee. Yes, it was.
Thank you. Any
Direction
questions of
there.
Andy or anyone? Jen, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Kevin, I assume you were there. Do you want to add any commentary from that discussion held by the committee at the workshop on June 26?
Just that option was discussed. That was kind of, yeah, that seemed like a good idea, and we used Oscar W as an example.
Kevin?
Yeah, I do look at industry and Oscar. They are working well. They have very limited input from council because they virtually got agreements to that fact. But I still believe if the status quo was to remain, I think it would work. But I've just got to toss in a little bit because most people are aware that I'm at a maritime conference in Fremantle at the moment. And one thing that has opened my eyes to what they do over here is we need to do it better. And that's virtually the only statement I can say. We need to pull our fingers out and do this job a lot better than what we are and get bums on seats.
Thank you for your feedback, Councillor Myers.
So just
Any
just
other
on,
comments or questions?
Yeah, just on what Kevin's mentioned there. So are you able to bring back any ideas or suggestions from that forum that might help us out, Kevin?
Yeah, I do believe I can, and there's a lot of help out there that the Australian Maritime Museums Conference, well, the council itself can actually supply. I mean, and Andy has, applied for and received grants from them. They help out really well. But I mean, just looking here at the two maritime museums in Fremantle, and you look at volunteers, and I questioned some volunteers this morning, and I said, "Oh, you're a staff member," because they were all staff and volunteers are all dressed the same. and I suppose at the end of the day, one gets paid, one doesn't. But a lot of the volunteers said that they are just proud to wear the uniform and promote the place they volunteer for. I mean, and not being rude, but if you go down to Mannum, there's no consistency, with what people wear. They maybe do comply a little bit with safety when they're on the grounds, but it would be good to give Morgan and Mannum like a complete makeover, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money. And you'd actually get a lot more volunteers there, I think. No, sorry, visitors that are paying.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm mindful of time, so we'll move on. So next steps, obviously today's briefing, a report will come back to you, Council, in August. And the last part of the conversation, and I'll stop sharing my slide, is other considerations, information, things that you feel that we should make sure that we cover in the report. So I'll just stop sharing so we can all see each other. All right, time for a general discussion, commentary. Councillor McGregor, I think I saw first,
Yeah.
then Councillor Schultz.
Yeah, so just from my point of view, and I appreciate Kevin's the things we've got to do better, but do better with what? We don't have the funds to be able to do any better. So it's sort of this is the whole reason why the sustainability thing is there. So that's a comment I make. I think we need to make sure that we've got the staff costings and the staff costings ongoing. Sort of when Canali come on board, you sort of said that it will be increasing the staff costings. So that's obviously taking it away from other things that we do. Ongoing costs and also the risks. I would be really good, and I hope we include like a risk matrix of the risk of if we do this and the risk if we don't do sort of something, the risk to if the boats break down, but also to our volunteers as well. So all of that sort of, I think sort of needs to come be part of it as well. I know we're talking about a tranche 1 and a tranche 2. How, it's taken us this long to get this lot of information for a first tranche. The second tranche, what timeline are we looking at for that?
So that'll be subject to resourcing, but it will be in the next few months. We obviously wanted to focus on this, Councillor McGregor.
The only comment that I will also make is that because the budget for all of this is all in one and the staffing is sort of interrelated with this, what I see is a little bit of difficult making a decision on this without having the other tranche looked at. But I appreciate that there's quite a few moving parts in it.
Expand on that? Because could you just expand on that, given that any staffing will be determined by the decisions made? So we would consider what decisions are made on the boats to a broader staffing structure, and then any decisions that are made on those other elements would be then considered as part of that discussion.
Yeah, my concern is, and just in my sort of mind, is our staff aren't just specifically boats. Like we don't have we don't divide our staffing down and just go, you're dealing with boats, so you're on there. They do boats, markets, visitor centre, museum, and everything like that, and other stuff as well. So we just would have to be really mindful of that. We're not just looking at the staff costs for the boats as a standalone thing. Is what we need to take into consideration.
Yeah, and if I can, Kirsty, very quickly, you're quite right. Staff costs for tranche 1 are those that my staff and I have worked on to ascertain what those costs have been over the past 12 months. Going forward, if we continue to operate boats or divest boats, the tourism staff time still comes into play, particularly if we're still operating them, but that will have an impact on our resources, and it will impact on our future staff need that Ben would have to consider as part of his org structure. If the boats were divested, there'll be a release of pressure on staff that can then be put into the other areas of council to, as Kevin puts, and quite rightly, we need to do better in a lot of areas. And but we are stretched at the moment with our staff time. But taking that into account, we'd like to get the opinions on the vessels to figure out what then we're going to do with the remainder of the function.
Thank you, Councillor Schultz.
Yeah, my question is really basic. If a wooden timbered hull is put on a static display, does the hull degrade more being on a static display than it would when it's in the water?
Yes, it will continue to deteriorate in the water. It would have an impact out of the water, but of course it isn't going to sink there. So that's an advantage. A static display, I think what we would have intended by that would be that it be like a floating museum rather than be pulled out of the water and put on the stand.
So you've still got hull integrity so it's still got to be slipped, even if it's still in the water, it's got to be slipped. There's costs associated with that rather than being on dry land.
If it continues to be surveyed, yes, yeah. Like that's my understanding. Kevin, is that correct?
And
Yeah.
Councillor Schultz, yeah, Kevin can speak. When we first investigated this, my thinking was a static display would be a significant cost saving, but as we work through it, and you point out, there are costs associated because depending where it is, you still need to insure and survey and do those things. So there would be some savings, but not as significant as I first thought. Kevin, do you want to add anything to that conversation?
The only other way around it, and the costings have been done using Marion as an example, would be to spend 200 or 250,000 a once-off cost and put a total steel hull on the boat. Then you wouldn't be you've still got to abide by AMPS's regulations, like 2 inspections in 5 years on the steel hull, but you wouldn't be in the position where you got to slip, replace planks, redo the caulking, twice in 5 years. Once you put the steel hull on, it's pretty well there forever. And as I said, it's a once-off cost. Then if you went down the path of whether it's a static display or cruising, well, it doesn't actually matter one way or the other.
I think that's been investigated at some point. I think there would be some challenges with the historic nature of it, Kevin.
No, I've actually, considering I'm on the Heritage Board, I've actually gone down that path, and they actually agree by doing that, you're actually preserving the integrity of the whole vessel, considering that the way Victoria and New South Wales are locking up all the forest, it's going to come a day where you're not going to get the timber anyway.
So did we do that on the canally that we've just built?
No, because that's all brand new wooden hull, 3 inches thick, that won't need replacing for quite a few years.
Other questions, considerations, things? Yep, Simone.
Mine, I think each option needs to be really clear on the risk. Like Andy said, if we keep operating and there's a big cost for the Marion, then we run into that issue like that other council where we have to lock her behind a gate because we can't afford to run it down, and then we have that risk of the community. So I think we need to really keep our minds on long-term sustainability for these boats. We do know they're an asset for the region, and also long-term sustainability for volunteers, because you all saw on there that our volunteers are worth 600 odd thousand. So if we lost our volunteers, we can't sustain, you know, those sorts of costs. You know, the do better comment, I guess, like Councillor McGregor has said, we are limited in resources, and you know what I see from the last few years is at least we know what each area is costing, and we all saw, you know, one boat was costing 77,000 in staff. So how much do we add to that to make sure we can do the better? And this is where I think, you know, we really need to look at that option of leasing them out, and then you're having another, you know, another group being able to do better because that's all they do, because we do all these other things, and we just can't put the time into these boats. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Looking for some guidance, obviously, on the report. We want to make sure, and Simone, and Kirsty, risks are covered, and there is a section on risks for each of the options. Councillor Barber?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I remember as a kid seeing the Marion in the dry dock, and as much as it was exciting as a young kid, I think it was amazing for the community in general when the boat was restored and put back into service. So I personally would like to see it remain in service, but obviously if council can't afford to run it, own and operate, then the having the third party operating it and keeping it on the water, I personally think is probably the option we need to seriously consider.
I mean, I think, you know, I'm just interested before sort of, I mean, we don't form opinions, we don't make decisions, but I'm interested in the relative costings, benefits of each of those options before we go much further in the discussion. So the report's obviously crucial to have all those elements in it, and I'm sure it will. And we just need plenty of time to discuss those options. And then, of course, if we were looking at option 2, then you'd be looking at the associated activity, which is finding potential lease holders. You know how easy or hard that would be to do. So another element of risk is we can make a decision at council, but then we can't holders go back to square one. You know, so a big exploration, and I don't know whether that has its own problems, exploring well before we make decisions, then I don't know.
We didn't capture all of that, Mandy. I think you said we all need all the information and consider that in some detail once you have all that. And if option 2 was an option, then we'd need to explore and understand what that looks like. I think that's what you said,
Yeah.
but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Broadly, yes, I see that there's a element associated, risk and element associated with finding potential lead holders.
Yeah. So option 2 might be a great option potentially, but there has to be another party to be able to be open to that for that to work. So,
and there also has to be some questions asked about what if you can't find anyone to operate the boats?
Yeah.
What do we then do? And that then becomes a decision, another decision for council down the track.
Councillor Myers?
I'm just wondering whether, I don't know what the time frame is on when you're going to do the second stage of this report or what, but I think it's totally possible to get some people from the Oscar W and some people from Renmark, maybe to sit out at a round table and have a chat how both sort of leases work, because I do know Oscar W over, if you want to look at it over 10, 15, 20 years, it's actually been back and forth in council hands many times. They're just at the stage now, it's friends of the Oscar W's turn for a few years, but nobody knows how long that'll last. It might be the final move. Nobody knows. But I believe get the people around the table, have a chat, get the info.
Thank you, Kevin.
Just going to say
Jen?
that, I don't think we should be talking to Alexandrina Council about the lease. I think we should be talking to Oscar W. About what they're doing. Like, I don't think, you know, that's who we want to hear from. We want to hear how it's working for them.
Yep.
So yeah, agree. I think, you know, have a chat to them, see what they're doing. And I think we'll also have think your volunteers would probably be happier working for a little group than council. That's nothing against council, but they sort of they'll feel like they've got more ownership of that vessel. And I think that's a great thing for volunteers, you know. So
Totally understand that. Jen.
yeah, it's nothing against council, but you know, volunteers having their own group, they will take ownership of that vessel, and it will be, I think it will work really well. That's my personal opinion.
And because one of the considerations I didn't mention is WHS obligations, and councils is much more stringent and significant in that regard, much to the frustration and chagrin of our volunteers and our staff on occasions, Andy. And, you know, that's an important piece that we need to make sure is done because of the standard that we expect, rightly so. So no doubt there would be some benefits if it wasn't seen to be council operated or was done by someone else.
But how
Mindful-
much, just quickly, how much of that would still remain, Ben, considering council would still be the owner of the asset?
Yeah, I'd need to consider that and take some advice. We'd absolutely, there would be some requirements and obligations, but there also could potentially be some waiving of some obligations as well. So we'd need to consider that as part of the report.
Some of those things would just be for council that has to do as a council. So that is what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Anything that if you think of anything that you still want to make sure we're covered in the report, then please let us know. We'll consider those comments, especially around feedback from those involved in the Friends of the Oscar W or the industry, to see if that can inform us as well. Thank you. Hopefully it was an informative session. Thank you, Andy, and to the other directors who listened intently or did their emails whilst we spoke. Yeah, have a good day. If not, we'll say good night there.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.